maybe manic episodes, semi-psychotic episodes, but I didn't really know what they were, like what you'd call it. And no one really knew what was going on. They just thought I was a bit bonkers, which I am.
All right. Welcome. This is my friend, Ben Martin. Welcome to Unstraight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How you doing today,
Exciting.
man?
I'm good. Yeah, I've been up and about since 3:30 a.m. messaging you and
Yes,
whatnot.
we were texting earlier. I'm like, my God, what time is it where you are? Did you go to sleep at all?
I did get a few hours sleep. It was kind of like I was in bed resting from, a certain time. It's like my body was at rest, but my brain didn't switch off and sleep. Maybe it got like 2.5 hours.
That's not enough. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, man, welcome. First of all, tell us where you are.
Is it?
Tell us a little bit about who you are, whatever you want to share about, your upbringing. Let's just start there. Like little Ben. First of all, tell us who you are. We met on a Facebook group,
Correct.
Spiritual gay men, something like this.
Correct.
Yeah, I just started communicating back and forth, and I'm like, hey, this guy needs to come on my podcast because he's got a lot of good things to say, a lot of things that are going on in your life right now. I think would be really great for the listeners to hear about. And so, yeah, I was just excited to be able to talk to you about some of these things.
Thank you. Yeah. I currently live near Byron Bay, which I think a lot of people would know of Byron Bay just because of its kind of reputation. But I'm actually kind of about half an hour away from Byron in a place called Federal, which is really lovely.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm in Brazil and I'm from New York, United States. Let's just assume people don't know what even country Byron Bay is in. I only know because I have another friend who has a place in Byron.
Yeah, that's so true.
Byron Bay, where is that?
You think per your country. So I'm in Australia, and Byron Bay is on the right-hand side of Australia, and it's about, if you drive from Sydney, which a lot of people know, you go like 6-7 hours up the coast, and that's where you've got Byron Bay. And I actually grew up in Canberra, which is the capital of Australia, which I don't think a lot of people would need to know. But you asked me like little Ben, like kind of about what that was like. I mean, I was thinking about that earlier because you'd sent me a couple of questions you might ask, and I would definitely say that it was a very tumultuous time growing up. Like things were very, very, very tense. My stepdad was a brigadier, and he had served in the Vietnam War, for example. So he had a lot of, obviously a lot of trauma, a lot of, I would say, undiagnosed PTSD. And so it was a very like kind of volatile environment. So any little micro thing that like could set him off and make him quite angry and have lots of, outbursts of anger and stuff. So I grew up with my older sister, Jess, and our mum and our stepdad. And yeah, like, I wish I could look back and go, oh, my childhood was really fun. And I remember hanging out with my friends and stuff, but it just wasn't my experience. I work in mental health now, and I think that kind of common thread is your formative years. So felt pretty alienated. Yeah, felt pretty alienated growing up, but then through my work and kind of finding my tribe, I guess, friends that I'm close with, eventually you learn that even though it was shit, like it is a common experience, not as uncommon as people think.
Yes. You feel like you're alone a lot of times, and then you find out later you're actually not alone.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's go back to little Ben for a second. Was there a moment in your childhood or your adolescent years or whatever where you knew or understood that you were gay or that you were attracted to your own gender?
Yeah. I think that adults around me probably knew before I even had an idea or concept of what being queer or gay meant. But my kind of first clear memory is of being in primary school. I think I was in maybe year 2 or 3. And we had this substitute teacher, this guy who I guess would have been maybe 30 something. And like today I would describe him as like really hot, but as a kid, you don't have these descriptors in your head. But I remember I was doing something on my desk, and he came and like kind of put his arm around me just a little bit, like just close enough for me to feel kind of his presence. And I felt very enamored towards him. And I think in the back of my mind, I remember clocking that and going, well, I think not a lot of other guys in the class would be feeling the same. So I kind of clocked that differentness then. So I guess I would have been about 7 or 8.
Wow. Yeah. So you had that awareness that's even that young that there was something there, something. Do you remember feeling at the time that was like abnormal or like you shouldn't be feeling this way?
I didn't feel any guilt. I felt maybe the slightest pang of fear, like, because I was a pretty switched on kid, right? Like, and I kind of knew the world around me pretty well. I had to, because I grew up in such a volatile space. I had to be like really, they talk about people become very hyper aware and hypersensitive. So maybe I felt like the tiniest bit of fear, knowing that if this obviously develops, I know it would, and I knew it would develop, what that would mean for me in a society where we weren't raised with gay couples on TV. You know, it's not like now, which is miles better, but we weren't raised in the 80s with, you know, gay couples or anything like that. So, yeah, I felt maybe, you're right, good question, a little bit of fear, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. What about family? Like, you said you think some of the adults in your life probably understood before you did. Were they accepting? Was there any religious baggage in your upbringing?
Yeah, look, I think there was, but it was not kind of spoken about. My stepdad had been raised Catholic, and he later on in his life went through this huge period of studying religion to the point of not believing in organized religion anymore. He became, I guess, quote unquote spiritual. But when we were kind of being raised by him, I remember when I was a teenager, he found gay porn on the internet because I didn't know about clearing my browsing history. But a lot of people probably remember this back when the internet was kind of just getting up and running. If you search any type of porn, it would often open whatever random and like the filthiest, worst kind of porn as well. Like it'd just all sorts of shit would end up in your browser. And I remember him furiously charging at me one day being like, I don't care if you choose to be gay, but if you're into this, you need to get out of this house. And I was like so mortified because first I clocked that he was like, said I was choosing to be gay, and I wanted to be like, I'm not fucking choosing this, man. And the second thing was I had no idea about all this other shady porn stuff going on in the browser history. But anyway, a friend of the family ended up saying to him, like, dude, this is just how the internet works. He was just looking at some gay porn and all sorts of shit pops up. I went to a Christian primary school as well for a few years. And I guess all throughout the thread of growing up, like I knew being gay meant being quite different to the norm. And I knew that certain people would be fine with it and certain people would not be okay with it. So I tried to be at peace with that, but obviously, as you would know, it kind of eats away at you.
Of course, yeah.
So the less you can like live your authentic self. But yeah, I ended up coming out when I was 16, and my mum and my dad, who I'm close with, were fine about it. Mum was a little bit sad. She was kind of like worried.
Yes.
But ultimately,
I've had the same.
Good. Yeah, she cried a little bit, and I wanted to be like, it's not about you right now, but I got it. As her son, I did understand. Should have had to let go of some kind of concepts around perhaps me getting married, having kids.
Right.
All those kind of things. Yeah.
Right. In my case, my family grieved the loss of that. Like, because I was married and had children, and so they were grieving the loss of this beautiful, perfect Christian family that they thought we were, you know. Well, yeah, though it's difficult to, you know, to kind of navigate the family things. Especially, I mean, there's a lot of gay people who don't have supportive family. Not just, it sounds like ultimately let's say your mom was supportive of you, even though if she was initially scared or sad about it a little bit. But there's a lot who disown, you know, like a lot of people come from I've met. They're not supportive at all and have no relationship with them anymore. And it's very sad. It's family. really hard to navigate.
Yeah, I dated a guy when I was in my early 20s that had been disowned by his kind of biological family, and then
Yeah.
were adopted in by, ironically, by a Christian family who were just completely open and supportive. So
Wow.
yeah,
No, that's pretty cool. That's
yeah,
that's
it
a
was
that's a
cool.
happy ending.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's shift a little bit to another topic that I know is really important to you, and that is mental health. You mentioned that you're working in the mental health field. Can you give us a little bit of history or like an update on anything that either you're currently dealing with or that you've dealt with growing up? You personally, just give us kind of your mental health journey.
yeah. Okay.
If as much as you're comfortable sharing. I don't want to like,
Oh
you know,
no, like, and literally is the nature of my job. Like, I'm a peer worker. We're called mental health peer worker. And so my role, like at work, is all about being able to comfortably disclose kind of my own stuff. But look, I always suffered from depression, anxiety. That was kind of a given. I was a super sensitive kid, super anxious, super depressed, like had big, massive bouts of depression and stuff. Not to go into it too much because I don't want to trigger anyone that might end up listening, but I did make a decision to end my life when I was 16. It was the night before my 16th birthday. And, very thankfully, that wasn't a successful attempt. It did land me in hospital and I did nearly pass away. So that was obviously a huge mental health event, right? Like even just that one experience is enough to just carry you for the rest of your life on that one experience. And then several years later, I probably started having maybe manic episodes, semi-psychotic episodes, but I didn't really know what they were, like what you'd call it. And no one really knew what was going on. They just thought I was a bit bonkers, which I am. But then it wasn't until I was 27, I'm 36 now, I was diagnosed with bipolar 1. And for people that aren't familiar with bipolar, it's got a few different types. Bipolar 1 is basically the brain has a capacity to be suicidally depressed, or it can have the capacity to be like psychotic. So you've just kind of lost grip of reality. And over the last decade, I've probably been hospitalized about 15 times for less so for any type of depressive episode, more so for like a manic or psychotic episode.
do you mind sharing, like, what does that look like? If you would have a manic or a psychotic episode, can you give me like an example of what happens?
Of course. So there's 3 kind of categories of the higher levels of your brain doing this crazy shit. The first is hypermanic. So a bipolar person that's hypermanic, maybe they're like really productive at work. They're super clean, super tidy when maybe they used to be a bit messy. They're just getting shit done. Their confidence is probably increased. They probably just feel and seem a bit more charismatic. Hypermania is quite fun. Mania is kind of when you're like, it's kind of like the gears are going into overdrive. So you might be not sleeping very much. Don't worry, I'm not manic, by the way, from last night. It was just a bad, rough night's
Feeling
sleep.
overwhelmed?
Yeah, there's a sense of overwhelm, but then there's also
Right, welcome back. Obviously, we are in a different place, in different clothes. We had some technical issues we dealt with last night, and we are working through that, but we're going to try to continue the conversation. We were learning a lot, and so let's just see where this goes. How you doing? It's actually 12 hours later.
Yeah.
It's early morning for me. I'm barely awake. It's night for you.
Yeah.
You worked all day, so you're probably a little bit drained.
Yeah.
But,
I worked and then I drove to Brisbane, which is about 3 hours from where I am for a workshop that I'm doing. So I'll definitely be
so you're a little bit wasted maybe, huh?
Wasted from fatigue, yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of beers.
We left off right at where I had asked you to kind of help us understand a manic or psychotic episode. What would that look like? Give us an example.
Yeah. I suppose it's important to note that everyone is so individualized and everyone's kind of thought processes are different, but some things that kind of can commonly present in that hypermanic episode, which I was talking about, when you're heightened, you're more confident, you're kind of getting stuff done at work, maybe you're just kind of more active, you have an overactive mind, and your functioning is heightened and not necessarily in a bad way. And then when you get manic, it's kind of like when you start slightly losing grip of reality, as well as being hypermanic and, alert and heightened, I guess. But some examples, like when I'm getting manic, I might think people are talking about me when they're not. I might think, government agencies like doing conspiracies all over the place, and I'm starting to think about.
So you get like a little paranoid.
Yeah, I have in the past for sure, and like and then there is this fine line between manic and then psychotic. And for me, psychotic is when you've just completely lost touch of reality. So for me, like some examples I can give from my experiences, like believing that I was in the Matrix and speeding down a highway, believing that agents of the Matrix were after me, and that every single sign I saw, like literal post signs, was like a sign that I had to turn left, right, down. And it was very intense, overwhelming feeling of almost like you had realized you were like the main actor in a play or a movie that everyone was suddenly watching. It's really similar to the movie The Truman Show, in the sense that it's like you think you're breaking a fourth wall, and you think there's people that are aware of what you're going through. Meanwhile, you're just speeding down a highway by yourself. And you're doing all sorts of like really full on things.
So serious question. If you're in, or if a person is in this heightened state, is this when they probably need to seek professional help, like either hospitalization, something, because you could potentially be dangerous to others or to yourself, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in the circumstances where I've been psychotic, I think I've had 6 or so episodes of psychosis that have lasted upwards of about 3 weeks, I think. But what I guess is lucky for me and for, society as a whole, is that I was kind of intervened most of those times by police or by ambulance and police. And they did what in Australia, if you get put in hospital involuntarily, it's called being sectioned to hospital. And so, yeah, like it's a great question, but it's a bit hard to answer sometimes, because I have to admit that I've been in a position where I was potentially dangerous to others and to myself. Because I just had no grip on reality and what's real. Like, I think one time.
Are you cooperative?
Well,
go ahead.
This is really, the dark side of some experiences that people can have with this type of stuff, is like sometimes I haven't been cooperative. I've never been violent. I've never hurt anyone, which I feel really grateful for, because I think that I would really struggle with that after the fact and moving on in my life. I'd really struggle with that, with having that happened. But I've definitely been in that.
But I mean, basically you're not in control of your actions.
To a large degree, no, because you have no sense of reality anymore. I mean, like I once thought I was possessed by the devil. I once thought I was an elven prince from a different dimension. Like these are the type of big themes that come into your mind, and you believe it. You fully believe it. I remember being in hospital once and yelling so viscerally, thinking that I was possessed, that I remember a nurse who was looking at me through a window. I swear I saw her do like cross.
The sign of the cross, yeah.
And I've definitely had that movie moment where I'm literally dragged, kicking and screaming, into a solitary confinement.
My God, dude! First of all, my first thought is like, I'm so sorry that you have dealt with this and that you've had these experiences, because I can't imagine like this is. Do you remember afterwards? Like, I mean, does this cause trauma? Like kind of PTSD almost?
I would imagine, I'm working finally with a good psychiatrist, and he does believe I've got some PTSD stuff going on from, whether childhood experiences or trauma from these type of experiences. It would make a lot of sense. But yeah, I do remember everything. And, there's been some fun times too, funny moments and stuff. I've had amazing conversations with people in hospitals. I think I once thought I was an old Knights Templar, meeting an old Knights Templar from, I don't know, 16th century or whenever that is.
I'm sorry, but if this is like a rude or inappropriate question, but like, have you talked to people who aren't there? Like, having a conversation with...
I mean, I guess in the sense that maybe you talk to God. I'm not saying that God is not there, but in the sense that like maybe you have conversations out loud, or you say, "Oh, what am I doing with this and that?" But I've never had a presentation in my illness, I suppose you could call it, where I have seen things that weren't there. It's all basically been believing something to be true. So I remember really clearly, like, seeing this guy that I'd never met at a hospital. We were both in the ward together, and we like walked up to each other and kind of looked at each other and like nodded. Humans are very fascinating.
Wait, you believed this, or you were actually in a ward together?
Happened, yeah. And we kind of bowed to each other, and we started rambling about how we knew each other in a past life, and yeah, wild stories.
Oh, wow. I mean, I talk to myself for sure.
Yeah,
but
we all do.
We joke. I don't know if Australia has this joke that's like, it's okay to talk to yourself. It's just a problem when you start answering yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean...
I'm sorry. I definitely don't mean to make light of any of this.
No, always laugh. Humor is one of my favorite things. Absolutely. And like, I've laughed about so many different things that have happened in all sorts of different, hospital settings, community settings, due to my mental health. I think if we can't laugh, we'd be struggling a lot more.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so that, if that answers your question, that's kind of where psychosis can lead you.
Yeah, so, no, and I honestly, I've heard of this. I haven't studied it. It's not my field of, expertise or whatever. But I've actually never spoken to someone or even done any research or study about what does that look like? How does that present? So thank you for sharing that. That's like, very personal, but I mean, I think you could help a lot of people. I do have one other question kind of related to that. Do you think that being a gay man, being a part of the queer community and navigating like societal and social norms, do you think that that's made dealing with your mental health challenges more difficult?
Yeah. I think generally for all of us in the queer community, there is an added layer of vulnerability to experiencing mental health issues that is, higher than people that aren't in the queer community. And they've done
my experience, I know a lot of LGBTQ queer people who deal with mental health challenges a lot.
Me too.
I mean, I feel like it's very, very common in the queer community.
Yeah, me too. I had an art group today at work, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 people in the room, and 5 of those 7 people were identifying as being part of the LGBTIQ plus A community with, varying kind of diagnoses and varying mental health issues. So, yeah.
What's your opinion? Why do you think that is? Why do you think we as queer people tend to have more mental health issues than, and I don't know that this is even true. It's just in my experience and the people that I talk to and work with, friends, it just seems like there's a higher percentage of us that deal with all of these things than, say, normal, and I'm very quote unquote normal society, because hopefully more and more we become normalized.
It's a fascinating thing to think about. Like, maybe it's about added stress that we have throughout our whole lives, being aware that we're kind of different to the mainstream, the kind of the stuff I was talking about earlier about when you're growing up and you're different, and there's kind of some fear around that. And, maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's something to a higher prevalence of, recreational drug use amongst the queer community because of those societies. Like maybe it's just a melting pot of all these kind of things coming together and creating a slightly higher statistic of mental health within that community compared to heteronormative community.
For sure.
What do you reckon?
Well, I was thinking about it, and for me, in the experience and like kind of in the work that I do, I'm seeing a lot of people who have struggled their whole life to deal with self-acceptance and self-love because of society has told them, either because of religion or just because it seems abnormal even in regular heteronormative society. So you internalize that stuff from a very young age.
Yeah.
And so it just presents, more as the years go by, if you're not aware of it and dealing with it and actively trying to process and understand that it's okay. Yeah. It's okay, first of all, who you are. That's where I start with everybody. I'm like, even if you tell me, yes, I accept myself, yes, I love myself, I try to dig a little deeper, because there's usually some degree of, I won't go all the way to inner homophobia. I definitely experienced like inner homophobia for a lot of years while I was, coming out and trying to accept and love myself. Even when I thought I got to a point that I did love and accept myself, something would trigger and I would be like, wow, I guess I'm not there yet. And I mean, a lot of this is a process. I'm discovering healing and all of these recovering and being okay. It's a process. You're okay, and then maybe next week or a few months from now you're not okay, and you have to deal with another little piece of something that you thought you dealt with. There's layers, a lot of layers.
Yeah.
Say it again. Recovery is
not linear. We would always say in the mental health kind of field, it can be up, down, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But I really relate to everything you just said. And I think, like with your question, there has been research and study done into pretty much proving that the suicide rate is higher. We know this is higher in the queer community than...
Especially with young people, teens, young adults. Yeah. Very sad. I love the Trevor Project and the work they're doing. I volunteered with their chat line but I volunteered with the Trevor Project for a while, answering their chats, and it's just, it's heartbreaking, man. And it's rampant. It's very, very, very common, for young people to deal with all of this. Is there anything else in the mental health world that you want to talk about? Because I have a couple other areas I want to touch on.
Ask away. That's kind of my story as far as my kinds of bipolar, my lens of depression, anxiety and whatnot. But
thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that stuff, because that will really, I really feel that's going to be very helpful to a lot of people.
Thank you.
This next thing I want to talk about could be potentially touchy, where it's about relationships, and I know a little bit about what's going on currently, and so we don't have to talk about that if you don't want to, and I just move on to my second question.
That's
my
okay.
Second question concerning relationships, that is.
Totally fine. What is the question?
So currently, what have your relationships been like, and are you currently in one? And then how, maybe you can even share, like, how has your mental health journey played into your relationships, and has that made it more difficult to maintain a healthy relationship and all of that?
I'm sure if my exes were here, I would like to think, kindly laugh and say, yes, Ben's mental health issues definitely played a fucking huge part in things not working out for the best in the end. But what I'm learning as I get older as well is that even if you are, really full on in your mental health, like, there's always kind of two sides to a coin, two sides to a story, two sides to a situation. We are currently single. I've had a few relationships in my time, but two major relationships that I'd class as like being in love. And, you know, I guess for me, being innately sensitive, heightened person emotionally, I tend to have attracted relationships that are kind of like that big, bright, burning flame kind of at the beginning of that, like falling, like that honeymoon period that's like so bright and intense. And then a period of things still being bright and intense, still being bright and intense. And then I guess some triggering happening, or me and that person bringing out the worst in each other. So experiencing both that real high, and it's kind of ironic because we're talking about bipolarity really in a relationship. Like you experience that real high of the relationship, and then I've also experienced that really kind of toxic other side of that coin where you've brought out, you know, not the best traits in each other.
Right. Well, you know, from what I've experienced, and I've actually read about this as well, like most times in a relationship, you're mirroring, you know, you get to a point, and you're right. You know, it starts out the passion and the honeymoon phase that you called it, but you're actually mirroring, you're seeing in your partner the negative things about yourself that you don't like. And so that's kind of how we become reactive and, you know, can become very toxic very quickly.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. And I try and, I guess, you know, I've been single again for a good 6-7 months. I've been living with my ex, which probably wasn't the kind of best decision ultimately. I'm just about to move out actually next week, which will be really great. I'm really trying to frame my thoughts around that too, rather than go
right. New chapter.
Yeah. You know, I think I'm so good at saying, oh, this is going to be difficult, and therefore it is. But yeah, it's total new chapter.
Man, if I can tell you something,
yeah,
just with I'm working with people, and as you've probably seen in my social media stuff, I'm a strong believer in like positive affirmations.
Yes.
Like if you can speak in the present instead of this is going to be, and say this is, kind of speak it, you know, and if you want to talk in biblical terms, speak something that isn't as though it is.
Yeah. I've started
like it keeps your mindset in a place where you believe it. You start to believe that it's actually going to be okay. Not somewhere in the future, but like right now, it can be okay.
I've started saying, I am capable, as like a filler or a replacement of any negative thought I might have about, you know, the next few weeks, few months, however long, I don't know. But I've started just saying I am capable. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, that's great.
Like I am capable of getting through.
I did a post a while back about safe words, like figuring out a safe word or a phrase. Like you've got, I am capable, where when the negative thoughts start to come, you go to this safe word to kind of reframe and get your mindset back in a positive place where you can, you know, otherwise we can spiral so quick. You know, if you start letting those negative thoughts, you could just take you down, 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 and then we end up in a not a good place.
Completely agree. Yeah, Louise Hay is really good to check out for that positive affirmation kind of stuff.
Love it. You introduced me to her, I think.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
And like this video you sent me, and I'll actually put a link in the show notes. But I use this a lot, and it's
which one?
It's oh my God, there's so many. But I mean, there's one specifically that where she goes. I mean, it's just got like a lot of nature backgrounds, and the words just come across the middle, and she speaks. She's a very calming voice, and she does all these. She talks about, you know, the positive aspect of something different, like, you know, finances or relationships or whatever, and then at the end of that section, she does like some actual positive affirmations that I always repeat out loud while she's saying them. And it's been so good for me. It's like, I feel like it's really helped me get my mind in the right place. Good. So thanks for introducing me to Louise Hay.
You're welcome.
Self-care.
Yep.
You know that I care a lot about self-love and acceptance, and it's super important to me. So I have a question for you. What are you doing right now in your life to take care of Ben? Like to make sure that you're healthy, like in every way, body, mind, spirit, soul, all of it.
Yeah. Well,
What do you do to make sure
I'm keeping
you're
it pretty
good?
simple at the moment. I make sure to get to the gym at least 3 or 4 times a week, even if it's just for I find like even just the process of physically walking into the gym gives you heaps of endorphins just from that sense of achievement of like getting there. So even if it's like a 20, 25, 30-minute workout, I've done that for the day, head off to work, and make sure I keep in touch with my really good friends, family. So I've got that sense of connection. And I'm trying to keep reminding myself that it's really important to shift negative thought patterns. So kind of to catch them non-judgmentally and say, hey, I think I'm experiencing right now, I'm thinking fairly negatively, and kind of curiously ask myself, like, be curious about, I wonder what you could replace that with, or I wonder how you might be able to think a little bit differently in this moment. So
no, that's great. That's
being
great.
like gentle with myself about it as well. I find that is, been super helpful, especially over the last kind of couple of weeks. And I'm studying to do life coaching at the moment, which is still a little bit surreal to me because I'm still in kind of the learning processes of all of that. But I guess I'm focusing on self-improvement, self-development more so than I have for a while. It's
No, that's great.
empowering.
That's great. No, I've kind of been watching your journey since we met, I don't know, a couple months ago or whatever. I love seeing how you're really putting your mind into not just learning that, but like improving and staying positive. And I was curious, a question when you were just talking.
Yeah.
Can you feel when, like, dealing with bipolar, can you feel when you're heading to a negative place, or that you're shifting into dangerous territory? Are you able to feel that coming on? And then if you do, what can you do about that? What can someone do if they feel it coming? Is there a way to head it off?
Yeah, I think it depends which way you're kind of going. I guess specifically for advice for anyone that might be living with bipolar, if they experience depression or mania, whichever kind of way it goes, you can have mixed episodes. I haven't experienced that, so I can't kind of speak to that. But if I'm getting depressed, look, a lot of the time I just end up getting depressed. And it's, it's awful and it's heartbreaking, and it requires a lot of effort and a lot of work to get out of that hole. But lately, what I'm trying to do, if I feel myself getting depressed, I often feel it in my body just as much as in my thinking patterns. So maybe I'm having a negative thought, and then what my body kind of wants to do is completely shut down and basically take me off to sleep all day. So really, with the depression stuff, it's about effectively forcing myself to do the opposite of what I feel like doing. So often that's going to the gym. Often that's getting out of bed and realizing that once you're awake, you will still be most likely having those negative thoughts that you maybe need to redirect or shift or talk to your therapist about or what have you. But it's kind of about facing up to the fact that a part of that process to get you back out of depression might be difficult, or always being as gentle to yourself as you can. And I'm still learning a lot about being kind to myself. And then with the manic stuff, I describe it as, with mania, you can lean into the mania or you can lean away from the mania. So if you're leaning into the mania, you're going, wow, this feels really nice. I'm going to go have a beer, catch up with my friends. Maybe I'll have some drugs. Maybe I'll do this, or whatever your thing is. You can really lean into it, and that accelerates this process of just an upward spiral. Or you can seek, a consult with your GP. Are there any sleeping medications I can go on that can help me get better sleep and help bring my brain back down to its baseline? And just adopting. It's hard to give advice really because everyone's got their own strategies, but really to try and step back from hypomania so it doesn't get bad, quote unquote bad. I just like the phrase, just learn to gently lean away from the mania and don't let it kind of take you over.
Yeah.
Helpful.
You kind of answered what I have as my final question. And that is, what would you say to somebody who's struggling with mental health issues while simultaneously going for their dream like you are, like this coaching thing that you've been studying and or maybe dealing with a difficult relationship issue. What would you say to somebody who's struggling with all that? Like how do you maintain that? How do you keep moving forward?
That question, do you ask everyone that question, or was that specifically tailored to my exact situation?
No, that was because I know some of your background and everything that's going on. I mean, like because there's a lot of people in this situation where they are, obviously we struggle with our mental health, and we want to be the best person we can be. And that can sometimes get in the way of us becoming who we want to be and going for a dream that we have and having the relationship that we really want to have. How do you navigate the mental health stuff with simultaneously trying to go for the good stuff?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I guess if I had a friend that was studying something that they think they could have a real passion for and trying to improve themselves, so that's a positive in their life. If they were also struggling perhaps with some depression or anxiety or fear, a lot of it's fear. Hey, like it's either fear or love, some people say. But if they're having a lot of fear around what the future might look like, and if they are still somewhat, if this friend was in the delayed process of perhaps grieving a relationship because they didn't fucking move out of the house in the first month, like they probably should have, I would just say to be actively kind to yourself, like make an active effort to be gentle and kind on yourself. All the other things I was saying, like, opposite action. So if you really don't feel like going to the gym, it's probably the best time for you to go to the gym. Or if you really don't feel like making yourself a healthy meal, that's probably the best time for you to do that.
And you've gotten to a place where you're able to do that? Because I know people who deal with depression who, when they're in this state and they know what they need to do, but they're not able to force themselves to do it.
Relationship breakdown is my kryptonite. I've learned that over my whole life. So my kind of future forward focus at the moment has become about how can I enact everything that I've learned in the past to avoid this kryptonite activation from, say, like moving house and not seeing my ex anymore, or whatever the trigger might be for anybody. But it's a good question. Sometimes depression comes no matter what you do and try. And I think if that's the situation, then as maybe clinical as it sounds, I think that's the time you need to start revisiting your GP, psychiatrist, obviously friends and family. But then it's about that classic advice of just reaching out,
If you have a friend or someone specifically deals with this, I strongly believe in being proactive and checking on people. Like if I know that you have all these things, I'm going to periodically send you a text and say, hey, how are you doing? I was just thinking about you. I hope you're doing well. Everything okay? Ben, thank you so much for coming on and being so vulnerable, sharing your story, sharing about your mental health journey, and so much good advice in there. I mean, so many good little sound bites that can be so helpful for people who are struggling or maybe even feeling ways that they haven't yet figured out what's going on. Maybe some of this will make them realize, hey, I do need to get to my doctor or a psychiatrist or a therapist and talk about what's going on, because we need each other. We need help. I mean, and it's sometimes very difficult to reach out for help, but we want to be healthy. We want to be happy. We want to be at peace. And so that can only happen when we're proactively working on every part of ourselves, and the mental, spiritual aspect of it. It's so important. It's so, key. And man, you hit it on the head, talking about some of these things, and really appreciate your thoughts on all of that. We'll talk again. I mean, like we're in touch off of this podcast. So anytime you need something, reach out. I'm here, and we'll talk soon. All right. Thanks so much, man. I'll talk to you soon. So that was my friend, Benjamin Martin. Again, you heard a lot of his story and how he has some pretty significant mental health issues, and he shared with us some great insights and some ways to to feel better, get better, even when I've talked to him a lot, and he has some really great days. He has some really, really, really not great days. So if you're struggling with your mental health, he did mention also in there was a time that he tried to end his own life. And if that's something you struggle with, there are places where you can get the help that you need. So please take the time to work on yourself, to reach out to the people who love you and that you can trust, and organizations. I'm going to list a few in the show notes. The Trevor Project is a great one to turn to. Yeah, I know this has been a little bit more of a serious episode, but I think it's very important, especially as a queer LGBTQ person. We just seem to deal with a higher percentage of a lot of these issues. And so I thought it was important to have someone on who could kind of speak to that from a personal level. And I really appreciate Ben being with us. So I'm going to sign off. This has been Mitch for Unstraight, and you guys have a great day. And as always, I love to say big, big love.